Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gretchen, and today I want to take some time to talk about this year's International Booker Prize. Now, in just a couple days, on Tuesday, February 25th, they are going to be announcing this year's long list. Now, the long list is going to contain 12 to 13 books that were published in the UK between the 1st of May 2024 and the 30th of April 2025, and these are all going to be works that have been translated. Now, in the past, when this prize has been on its way, I have really taken a lot of time to think about the predictions I wanted to make as to what books I thought were going to make it on to the list. And with that, I tried to get into the heads of the judges. I tried to look at different publishing houses' records, and there are just so many things that go into figuring out what I want or what I want on my predictions list. However, the one thing that I never take into consideration is what I want to read from the eligible books. So this year, instead of stressing myself out trying to figure out what the judges will think or what they'll choose, I just decided I would look at the eligible books and pick 13 of those books that sound very interesting to me and books that I want on my TBR and that I want to eventually get to. And if some of these end up making it onto the long list, that's fantastic. I will be very happy and have an excuse to get to these books sooner or later and not stress myself out about seeing how many of the predictions I can get right. Now, I'm going to talk about those 13 books that I really would love to see make the long list. But before I do that, I do just want to say that the list that I'm about to give you, I pulled or I worked from the list that they have on Goodreads for eligible books for the International Booker. Now, that is not an official list by any means. We don't know exactly what books are even in contention, but there is a community that puts that list together and keeps it up to date. So hopefully all of the books that I am mentioning truly are eligible. And the other thing to mention too that I know is a consideration when talking about the International Booker is I didn't necessarily look at the publishing houses to make sure that they were all in line with what the rules are. There are some bylaws and things like that that say publishers can only have so many submissions that they can make based on their record with the International Booker. I don't think I violated any of those rules, but just so you know, in case you are looking at my list and you're like, oh, nope, they can't have 2 submissions or anything like that, just know that I really didn't take any of that into consideration. This is solely about the books that I want to read from the eligible options that are out there. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the 13 books that I would love to see make it on to the long list. The first book that I would love to see make it is a book called Sad Tiger by Neige Sinno, and this was translated from the French by Natasha Layer. And this is a piece of autofiction from what I can tell. It's a piece of autofiction about the author's experience with being sexually abused by her stepfather, and ultimately all of the recourse that came from that, including a trial for his wrongdoings and the author ultimately moving from France to Mexico. It sounds like it is going to be a gut punch of a read. This is also a book that is getting so much acclaim for other prizes, and it seems to be a very important read, and there's a lot of buzz about this in the literary community. So I'm hoping to see this one, even though I know it's going to be a tough subject matter. It's a very important read, and I would love to see it make that long list. The next book that I'd love to see is Boy with a Black Rooster by Stephanie von Schult, and this is translated from the German by Alexandra Roche. This book sounds very interesting, and it has a lot going on with it. So the description of this book says, can an 11-year-old boy succeed where others have failed? Can he recover a kidnapped child, disprove a false accusation of assault, or win a sleep deprivation competition that has driven others mad with tragic consequences? This is set against a pseudo-medieval post-apocalyptic backdrop reminiscent of Cormac McCarthy, Angela Carter, and Missouri Williams. This novel shines with the inner radiance of good deed in a naughty world that will leave you haunted, horrified, and completely riveted. That sounds so fascinating to me. I have no idea how we're gonna get through all of that and what the story will actually hold, but it sounds like a really fun ride, and I am totally here for it. The next book that I'd love to see make the list is called The Bishop's Villa. This is by Sakin Espini, translated from the Italian by Clarissa Botsford. Now, this is a book that immediately caught my attention because I'm a fan of Sakin Espini. He wrote one of my favorite books a few years ago called Neige, and as soon as I knew that he had a new book, I immediately purchased it, and I have a copy ready to go. This book, I was going to read it regardless, but once I read the description, I immediately knew that this is a book that I am probably going to get along with. And what the book says is it's based on the true story of a nefarious collaboration between the Catholic Diocese of Grosseto and the fascist authorities. The Bishop's Villa is a masterful weaving together of fact and fiction by one of Italy's most exciting young writers. So that just sounds like a great book to me, and I would love to have a chance to read this sooner than later. And next we have Samahani, and this is by Abdelaziz Baraka Sakin, and this is translated by Mayada Ibrahim and Adil Babakir. And this one sounds incredible. As soon as I saw this book, I was like, this is a Gretchen book. I immediately need to put it on my TBR. And it says, Samahani means forgive me in Swahili, two words that stand in stark contrast to everything that happens in this novel. Set in 19th century Zanzibar, this is a dark story of slavery, cruelty, and vengeance that depicts the agonies of the native Zanzibaris at the hands of both Europeans and Arabs that turns their apparent island paradise into a living hell of cruelty and exploitation. Through the relationship between a spoiled, scheming, powerful Omani princess and her eunuch African slave, Sundus, captured and castrated by Arab slavers, Sakin builds a grand narrative that paints a picture of barbarism and man's inhumanity to man and becomes a furious cry against persecution in all its forms. I mean, that just sounds like a fantastic read and a very important one too. Another book that immediately caught my attention once I read the first line of the description is the book of Disappearance by Ibtisam Azam, and this is translated from the Arabic by Sinan Antoon. This is a book that the description begins by saying, what if all the Palestinians in Israel simply disappeared one day? What would happen next? How would Israelis react? These unsettling questions are posed in Azam's powerfully imaginative novel, and it's said that it is set in contemporary Tel Aviv, 48 hours after Israelis discover all their Palestinian neighbors have vanished. It sounds like it's from multiple perspectives. It seems like there are a lot of characters, so that alone makes me want to pick up this book immediately. And all of the things that have happened over the past few years related to Israel and Palestine, I think that it's going to be a very important read too. So the next book that really caught my attention off of the eligibility list is one called There's a Monster Behind the Door, and this is by Gaël Bellum, and this is translated from the French by Karen Fleetwood and Letitia Saint-Loubert. Now, the reason that this immediately caught my attention is that this book is also longlisted for the UK's Republic of Consciousness Prize. So I don't know what the likelihood of having a book on two prize lists at the same time will be, but regardless, remember, this is about those books that I want to read, not necessarily my predictions for what will make it. This book is set on a French-occupied island in the Indian Ocean. It's set in the 1980s, and apparently it follows a kind of villainous family that has a daughter that's able to escape their clutches, and she runs away and she turns to education and school for salvation. So it sounds like it's going to be a very interesting read. It's probably not going to be an easy one, and it's going to touch on things like colonialism, and also it promises to give a lot of history of the island. So all of that just sounds really interesting to me, and I can't wait to get to this one. The next book that we have is called The National Telepathy, and this is by Roque Larraque, and this is translated from the Spanish by Frank Wynne. And this is a strange one, so I'm just going to read directly what it says. It says, in September 1933, the Peruvian Rubber Company delivers 19 indigenous people from the Amazon to businessman Amado Dam, intended for Argentina's first ethnographic theme park. Unexpected among the human cargo is an artifact harboring a sloth with a fascinating yet terrifying secret: the ability to create erotically explosive telepathic connections between people. What ensues is a raucous satire of men's fear of women's bodies, of the illusion of logic in the structures of so-called civilization, and the way class and race obscure identities when the observer is a man with power. That sounds so interesting to me. It sounds odd. It sounds quirky. It sounds like catnip for a reader like me. I love a good weird book. And this is a book from Charco Press. And Charco Press, they put out really good books, and they're very selective about what they put out in the world. So I can only imagine that this is going to be a great read. The next book is called On the Greenwich Line, and this is by Shadi Lewis. This is translated from the Arabic by Catherine Halls. This book is about a migrant government worker in London who's kind of disenchanted and not really happy with what he is seeing happening to not only himself but also other people in the migrant community. He somehow gets wrapped up in planning a funeral for a Syrian refugee, and he sees a ton of similarities between that person's story and his own story, and it just sounds like a very interesting book. It sounds like a gripping read. It's going to probably be another one of those books that will make you angry and bring up just a lot of those social issues of today. So I'm very much looking forward to that one as well. The next two books that I would love to see make the long list, I'm going to kind of clump together. And the reason is because I heard about both of these books from Sarah over at Eyes on Indie. I think both of these books were in her favorite reads of 2024 video that she did. But the first one is called Caesaria. This is by Hannah Nordenhawk, and this is translated by Saskia Vogel from the Swedish. And this book says that it is a Gothic tale set at the dawn of modern gynecology, when the female body appears as a cryptic landscape and male hubris reigns. I think that The main character of the book was actually the first child to be delivered by a cesarean section, and I think that she is held prisoner by the doctor that did that. So it sounds like a very feminist book. It sounds like something that's going to be very disturbing as well, and the way that Sarah described it, it just sounds so interesting. So I would love to have an excuse to read this one. And then the other one that she talked about sounds really, really up my alley, and it's called Hurst 07769, and this is by Laszlo Krasznahorkai, and this is translated from the Hungarian by Odalie Mulzet. And basically what this is you have the main character. He discovers, I don't think that he's actually a physicist, but he has knowledge of it, and he stumbles upon the fact that there's going to be this great disaster that is imminent, and it is coming for all of us and going to destroy all of us. So he's trying to get the attention of Angela Merkel, and he's trying to correspond with her to get this information to her. He somehow is also mixed up with neo-Nazis. I think that his boss is a neo-Nazi, and he is basically caught up in just all kinds of stuff, and it just sounds like it's going to pose a lot of, you know, really important questions about moral dilemmas and good versus evil, right versus wrong, all of those things. And the thing that stuck out to me most about this book is that there's kind of a gimmick behind it as well. And this is a book that is, the entire book is one long sentence. So the fact of that kind of gimmickiness to it also warms my heart. I love a book that has a little bit of a quirk to it, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's done. And yeah, I would love to see this book make it. So another book that I would really love to see make the long list is called What Kingdom, and this is by Fina Grael. This is translated from the Danish by Martin Aitken. This book is setting out to explore the psychiatric system as well as mental health amongst young people. It is also, as I was kind of looking into it more, I heard it referred to as a modern day The Bell Jar, and also a more modern version of something, say, like Girl Interrupted. Also written in vignettes, which is something that I very much enjoy. I love a good vignette book. So that immediately made me want to read it. And yeah, obviously I'm sure it's going to be focusing more on probably the system in Denmark, but a lot of that probably translates to other countries as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what goes on with that. And also, even if it doesn't necessarily translate, it's going to be interesting to see if there are differences in the systems as well. My penultimate pick is Clean by Alia Trabucco Zerán, and this is translated from the Spanish by Sophie Hughes. This is a book that has been on my radar for a while. I actually have a copy of it out from the library right now, so it would be perfect. And this is basically, it's a literary thriller. There is a girl that ends up dead, and the housemaid that is living with them, she's kind of all-knowing. She sees all kinds of things happening within the house and the dynamic of the house, and she is under or being interrogated by the police throughout the duration of the book. So I'm not sure if this is kind of like interview style or really what the structure is, but it sounds really good. I love a good messy family book, and yeah, I've heard good things about this book as well. So looking forward to getting to this one. And then last but not least, we have a book that I actually already read, but I would be willing to do a reread of this if it did end up making it on to the long list. And it feels like a very Booker type book, and that's The Empusium by Olga Tokarczuk. This is translated from the Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. This is a book that I enjoyed. I had a good time with the book, but it's also a book that had so many layers to it it that I don't think that I honestly caught everything on my first read. So I would love an excuse to pick up this one a second time, knowing what I know now as far as what happened throughout the book, so that I could have, you know, a sharper eye on what I was reading to see if there was more to extract from the book, because there is absolutely no way that I picked up on everything the first time. So there you have it. Those are the books that I am hoping make it on to the long list this year. And even if they don't make it, like I said, the books that I selected are ones that I want to read regardless. So they're added to my TBR and I am going to get to them eventually. I would just really like to have an excuse to get to them much sooner. We're going to have a lot of international booker content coming up. I plan on reading the entirety of the long list, but I will say, even though I plan on reading the entirety of the long list, I'm going to be a little selective at first. I know that there's always instances where some of these books are harder for me to get my hands on, so there might be a delay in getting some of them in my hands, but I will also say I will make every effort to read the entirety of the short list by the time that the prize is announced. So yeah, I'm so excited that we're back to Booker Prize season. We have the International Booker being announced this week, and then next week we have the Women's Prize for Fiction longlist being announced. So there is so much book prize content to come, and until we read again, bye!